I'm very excited to be joined by Kim van Lavieren today. Kim is co-founder and CTO of Dawnguard. Dawnguard are the startup building AI-powered tools to make shift left security the default from day one through every iteration. We'll be talking today about how security by design is becoming a non-negotiable, why most teams push security too late, and how Dawnguard is using AI to validate secure architectures from the start. A very exciting conversation and a very exciting thing you're building, Kim. So thank you for joining me. And why don't you maybe kickstart, give us a little bit of a background onto yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me, Katie. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm Kim. I started building software when I was about 10 years old. I started really early on. And the funny thing was that, my dad was a software engineer and he told me you have to build securely. So even as a teenager, I already started introducing security controls in my software. And I've been doing so ever since, right? I've done quite a few things. I've worked in the military. I did offensive security operations there. I worked as a security engineer, security architect, worked as a CISO, head of security engineering team for Amazon in the US. Did some other fun things, wrote a book on cloud security, teach for IC2 with the CISSP certifications and things like that. Teach at a couple of universities as well in the cyber domain. Really I've always been working in cyber, but I've done quite a few different jobs and have really seen the whole ecosystem, if you will, from every different role.
Absolutely. I mean, you literally just demonstrate there. You've done a little bit of everything, but it's all been within kind of centralized within the world of security, and I think that's what's really kind of powerful about what you build in Dawnguard, because you come in with the expertise, but it's the real life expertise. It's the real world
Right.
practice, and recognizing, okay, hey, there's something here that's I suppose kind of there's a gap in the market. And I mean, why don't we kickstart there, Kim? Because obviously, very exciting times. You've come out with Dawnguard, and obviously on the earlier doors of the journey, but by all means, arguably one of the more exciting parts of the journey. I mean, what inspired you and your co-founder to launch Dawnguard? What gaps did you see in traditional kind of security startup tooling that made you go, hey, we've got some potential here with what we're going to build?
Right. Okay, so there's really two things that play a huge role, right? So one thing is the current security landscape. What we see is that most tools focus on finding issues that are already in production, right? So it might look for vulnerabilities, it might look for hacks taking place, it might look for misconfigurations that are in production. But rather than fixing these things later on, we believe that you should try to fix them before they happen, right? So for a long time, there's been attempts to try to shift left in the security realm and really try to figure out how you can design something securely, but it's been very difficult. And that's the thing that I've experienced in practice as well, right? I've worked in organizations where we've had tons and tons of security reviews coming in every day, new vendors being onboarded, new applications being built. And one of the things that I notice is that, these business teams are focused on shipping, right? They want to create new value for their company. They want to make sure new functionality gets shipped to their customers. They don't have time to think about security. So I think in a lot of ways, it's very logical that security becomes an afterthought for those teams and that we need those tools to clear up after the fact. But we believe that especially with the AI technology that we have now, we've made a lot of strides in being able to actually get that secure design embedded in the processes without putting a huge burden on our business teams. And that's I think the most important thing, right? Those developers want to develop. They don't want to sit there and look at 20 different vulnerabilities and figure out if their code is vulnerable or spend days on threat modeling. They want to make sure that they can build something and somebody else can tell them, hey, this is how you should make it secure, or this is how you should make it resilient, or even this is how you should optimize for cost without them having to dedicate a lot of time to it. So something that we saw is that there's of course tools that exist now that, for example, template solutions. They say, hey, if you deploy a virtual machine, you should configure it this way, and this is the only way. But a lot of times, once again, in practice, that doesn't work, right? Because there's custom things that need to happen. It might not integrate well with new solutions, might not integrate well with your legacy environment. So what we have done is we've created a system where you can really go back to that design phase. Tell our system, hey, say I want to build this API. and we tell you what you need to do on the non-functional side. So we tell you everything you need to do on security. We need to tell you everything you need to do on resilience, performance optimization, really any pillar of the well-architected framework, and we do it seamlessly. So you tell me what you want, I tell you how you need to fix it security wise, and we generate the code for you to be able to deploy it. So no longer do you have to sit there and gather all the non-functional requirements from your stakeholders or from your policies or from any best practices you're following. We do that for you automatically, right? So we scan your policies, we tell you what you need to do there, and we allow you to deploy it with one click of a button. So rather than having to make that whole design yourself, you just tell us what you want, we design it for you, we do it securely, and we allow you to deploy it. Making sure that not only it's embedded at design, but the implementation is actually in line with what you designed, because that's something I've seen in practice as well. We'll make some great design that's really well architected, but then somebody goes and deploys it, drops the ball somewhere, and still ends up being insecure in production. So what we think we can do with this is we can make it a lot easier for these business-oriented teams to ship while maintaining your security posture and really negating the need for all the security tooling that we call clean up the mess tools that detect what's wrong in production, because we can fix it before you ever deploy it, and we'll monitor it all the way throughout its life cycle, all the way from the idea until you sunset an application or infrastructure. And that's really what we're trying to do, and that's just something that we've seen in our decades of cyber experience that nobody's been able to solve, right? So that's the problem we're addressing.
And I think that's what's really interesting and impressive about what you're building. It's like you say, it's actually coming from that real life practical experience of, hey, actually we can see that this isn't happening early on. And obviously I think this makes you guys pretty unique because it's like we say, you're really kind of coming on the forefront of the kind of, it's like the ahead of deployment. It's coming in at the beginning of the process. It's right at the beginning before before you've already built something, and then, oh, hey, actually, we're super vulnerable here. I mean, is there anything in particular that you would say really defines why, or what kind of, is there one key thing that you would say, this is really what defines us in the market? This is really what makes us so different, especially against kind of, how like the AI driven platform validates secure architecture ahead of that deployment phase?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest difference that we have with all of our competitors, everybody comes in and really doesn't shift as far left as we do, right? There's a lot of competitors that might read out your ticketing tools, or they might say, hey, you already have dev tickets, we'll improve on those, add security requirements to it, or we might check your infrastructure's code that's generated with vibe coding. But what we do is we go all the way back to the architecture level. So we don't just look at the code of your application or the code of your infrastructure, but also at the relations that all of your architecture has. So we have a much higher abstraction level, and we go even beyond or before the point where you have tickets, right? Because by the time you have tickets, you already have a design. You could have already made a lot of design mistakes. You could have already introduced a lot of vulnerabilities that you will never catch later on in the life cycle, right? Because your traditional tooling, like your static or dynamic analysis tooling, it won't catch those architectural issues because it doesn't know what your architecture is. And that's really what sets us apart, right? We try to understand your entire ecosystem, the way it works together, and we plot anything you try to do that's new inside of that ecosystem and validate how it will interact and if it meets all your requirements. But the beauty of it is you can also use it to predict what's going to happen, right? For example, if you have a company that wants to implement quantum safe encryption, our platform can tell you what that entails. What would you have to change in your environment to be compliant with that? And that's a huge shift, right? Oftentimes we write policy, we say, hey, now everybody has to comply with the policy, but we have no idea what the impact is. Now you can very easily determine what that impact is and also find a solution that might cover your entire infrastructure at once rather than having all these point solutions everywhere else that might inadvertently actually break because they might not be built well or they might not be set up to work together with other security functions.
Yeah. And I think kind of You mentioned a couple of things there, but one thing that I always find, and a lot of conversations I've had, is how so many teams, and especially at the earlier stage, view security as a bit of a checkbox. I think it's kind of the innovation often is more important than security becomes the afterthought. It's a case
Yep.
of, look, this isn't our priority, and it can be expensive. And I think that prediction piece that you talk about probably helps break down why, or the value, or this is the impact of not necessarily having this security in place. And then I suppose that cost piece is, actually, this is how expensive something is if we actually let it happen, instead of just paying for, okay, let's put ourselves so we're not at risk. But how do you shift that mindset to an architecture first kind of thinking, more specifically around security architecture first, rather than, like I say, it being an afterthought when people are in a build?
Yeah. So I think there's one really important thing is people are willing to change their behavior as long as it doesn't take too much effort,
Yeah.
right? So if you make that threshold very low to implement the secure design, then you might become successful. So what we've done is we've really taken away all the manual work that say a dev engineer or a cloud engineer would have to do, and we've automated all of it for them. So by actually reducing their workload, we feel that they are far more likely to adopt that way of working because it doesn't hurt them anymore. It actually saves them a lot of time in the long run. It allows them to be faster. So rather than security being that hurdle, or them looking at the security teams like, hey, they're naysayers, you get a security enabled environment. And that's really what we all strive for, right? To make sure that security enables our business, because we're not just doing security for security's sake. We're doing security because we have some business that we're running. We're trying to achieve something. We're trying to help our customers, trying to make the world a better place, what have you. But that security should be a way of doing it and shouldn't be the goal on its own. And that's really what we're facilitating by making that process seamless, by taking the frustration out of it, by also making it transparent, right? Oftentimes now security review processes are completely black box. A functional team might send something into the security team, they'll hear something back weeks later, and they'll tell them, hey, you have to redo everything because it's not correct. So we have taken an approach of a collaborative platform where these functional and non-functional teams can work together, and you can very transparently see what those recommendations are, why they're being brought up, but also something that I think is really important. You mentioned that trade-off, right, between security and value. So what we will actually do is we'll show you, hey, for example, you have 3 firewalls here, but it's actually from a security perspective doesn't really matter. One firewall would have done the same thing. So maybe from a cost optimization perspective, you want to downsize to one firewall and get that same security outcome. So we'll actually show you some trade-offs too between security and say performance or a functionality. And that's something that's unique, right? Oftentimes it's a yes or no, very binary, it's good or bad, but we want to show you choices and you can optimize for what you want yourself, right? Not every business has the same risk appetite, and we can kind of accommodate and scale with your own risk appetite and let your people make choices. And I think that really changes the conversation. It doesn't become a discussion of you're allowed or not allowed to do it, but it becomes, okay, so how are we going to do it? What is the most suitable way to do it for our organization?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned again something there that is important to highlight, the flexibility or the fluidity that you're talking about, because when you're so early stage, it's really tough to know how much you can invest. And there's only so much cash in the pot. You can't,
Yeah.
realistically, you can't just throw it out. But sometimes realizing that, okay, this is how much this is going to cost, and it gives me X amount of protection, and then this is how much this is going to cost, and it gives me this bit more protection. Is this worth it? Is this difference kind of worth the extra
Yep.
cost it's going to be? And giving somebody that control more often than not probably also puts in the thought of their head then that, well, okay, do I want to pay a little bit less but know that I'm not getting these bits of protection, and then am I going to be more conscious around where I'm vulnerable? And I suppose it's that education piece as well, and just letting people know these are the places where you're going to leave gaps, you're going to leave vulnerabilities, and this is the impact of not having them. It might be worth the risk. It might be worth it for the time being. Probably
Yeah.
not, but sometimes it is. Sometimes that might be the case, and I think you've just really hit some nails there. It's definitely going to be kind of letting people have accessibility to that information. I suppose data drives decisions, and the more information people can get, well, the more likely, obviously, they are to be able to make the right decisions for them. I suppose is probably the best way to phrase it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, kind of to pivot slightly, because I think to go specifically into what you're doing at Dawnguard, because you're at an exciting phase. Like I say, you're pretty fresh coming out, bringing this new product, and obviously it's been in the works. You haven't exactly just kind of woken up overnight and been like, right, we're ready to go. Obviously, there's a lot of hard work that goes behind this, but you're really on in the journey, and you for what you've already been able to achieve in this short space of time is really impressive. What's kind of one bold goal that you would say that you're setting that, okay, in the next 12, 18, or 24 months, this is going to be what people associate with Dawnguard. This is what we're really going to do in the market to make noise, and arguably equally as importantly, differentiate from all the noise that's going on in that space.
Yeah. So we believe that, in that time span, people will say that we've established a new security category because we're not like any existing category. And we really feel that we're here to change the game, right? We've done a lot in the security world. We've earned our stripes, and we're here to really change the game, change the way security is done on a fundamental level. And that's what we're going to do over the next year, year and a half. We believe that the customers that we've onboarded and that we're going to onboard in the coming months will say that we've changed the way they do security on that fundamental level. So what really sets us apart in that next year and a half is that we're going to integrate that entire development lifecycle. But we start out with infrastructure, right? So currently we're servicing customers' infrastructure, but we're going to include the whole application layer as well. So we'll do your architecture all the way from the infrastructure all the way to the application layer. So, for example, if your company is working on vibe coding, we'll include your vibe coding platform, and our platform will tell you, hey, okay, this is great. You built it with vibe coding, awesome, but let's adjust it this way so that it fits into your architecture seamlessly and securely. So, because a lot of companies now, are really getting on that AI bandwagon, are using it to help them ship faster. But there needs to be security embedded into that, right? And currently it isn't because all these algorithms are trained of public code repositories.
So it sounds like definitely very exciting times ahead, and I think this is always the exciting part of being a kind of an early stage builder. It's a roller coaster, there's no doubt, but it's definitely it's where you can really define who you are in the market. And I suppose when you're early on in who you are, or some of the first to kind of the table with this idea, it really gives you that full scope of defining what that category looks like, exactly like you've said. Well, what I want to say then, Kim, is for early stage or enterprise builders that are listening to this, you're going through the build stage yourself right now. If anybody can understand what it's like to go through that and stuff, it's obviously you're doing it yourselves. What's kind of one shift that they could make today to move towards a more kind of security by design kind of like attitude or architecture? Is there anything you could say, look, if you were going to take anything from this conversation, this is what's probably the most important.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, especially in the stage where your developers are really focused on generating value, make it easy for them to be secure. So make sure that you have the basic controls like your secure development lifecycle with your static code analysis, all those things embedded, and that you also try to build in some of the security functions as general services, right? So don't burden every developer with learning how to do cross-site scripting prevention, but build a general service that can do that for you that they can just consume. So try to take, the extra effort out of it and really let them focus on what's important and facilitate them in that process. I think that would be my main thing. That's what I try to do for my engineering teams, and that's what I've seen work a lot in the past with companies that want to make that shift to secure development.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's just make it simple, keep it easy.
Right.
Like, don't make it a burden. Like, and I think that's can feel easier said than done, but at the same time, one thing that always people always do in security is they just overcomplicate things and they give it
Yes.
unnecessary buzzwords and different languages and this, that, and the other. And it's like keep it simple, make it digestible, and I suppose then it's just you don't make it kind of an extra hurdle that people are like rolling their eyes at kind of thing. But no, this has all been really interesting, Kim, and I think you've what you've been talking about is super relevant. I think it's a gap people know that's been in the market, but nobody's necessarily come forward with the appropriate solution that does exactly what you say. It gives you the information, it gives you the data, it can help predict the kind of what's coming. But in addition to that, it keeps it simple, and as we've reiterated multiple times, that's definitely what's key. Um, what about for our listeners? If people have been listening along and they want to find out a bit more, or they're just interested in what you're building, and they want to reach out. I mean, what's the best way that people can get in contact, or kind of maybe stay on with the journey of Dawnguard? Because, like I say, you guys are you've got an exciting 12 to 18 months ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely suggest following us on LinkedIn. You can also take a look at our website, dawnguard.ai. Currently, though, we're not accepting any other design customers. We already have too many to onboard right now. But yeah, always feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or send us an email through the website, and we'd be happy to talk to you and see how Dawnguard can help you.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining me here today. This has been a fascinating conversation. Very exciting things happening. To anybody watching, I would say watch this space. Make sure to keep an eye on Dawnguard. I think there's going to be some very exciting things coming in the future. But to our listeners, it's as always, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to share this episode with your security peers. Get connected with us on LinkedIn. Get connected with Kim and the team on LinkedIn. But that's it for today. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.